idea of what you are interested in, and I can speak about it. There's actually kind of two parts to my talk. One is a little technical, and I was encouraged by your professors to give a little bit of that, and the chairperson has also indicated some interest in it, so I will start with that. Let's see, where are we going here? This one, right? So basically, the overall goal which we've had for many years and will continue to have, I like to sum it up in one line, which is sustained, fast, inclusive growth. And every one of those words is important. And I want to start with this structural thing. In central planning, we abolished the Planning Commission in 2014 and created the Niti Aayog. So what is the difference? I'll just give a little bit of idea here, and then the new strategy I'll go into. So basically, much of central planning, it started in a closed economy framework, and when we opened up in 91, we just added the external sector into it. Okay, and the thinking still was we got to generate savings, investment, and then growth. Okay, that's no longer how we think of it. Okay, conceptually. So what is it? We think of economic development now as part of growth policy. Okay, and we are an emerging market economy at this point. I'll say a little bit more about that as we go along. It's the policy for public goods and the environment for growth that the government has to create, which will lead to private investment and growth. The part of which is related to savings, etc., is part of that, because you do not have private investment unless it's productive and it's profitable. So this is kind of a one-line change in it. So savings follow, they come. If you have productive investment, which is not forced, there is no dearth of savings in the world. They come from all over the world, they come from India. So that's kind of the change part of it. So what is it that we do? We create strategy. So economic policy and institutions for promoting investment, employment, and growth. That is the goal of policy advisors like me. And inclusion and empowerment is a big part of that. I will say a little bit more about this. So after that, I will try to explain a little bit about the strategy, and then I will go into trends, development, opportunities, which our session chair has raised, and tell you the impact of that, and then at the end give you a little bit of where I see, where we plan, you can say we don't plan anymore, but where we see, envision the country going. So what is the development strategy? Obviously, I try to simplify it. I actually have a paper called the Bharatiya Model of Inclusive Development, which you can download from the Niti website. It's on the website, which has more details on it. But I just want to give you an outline of what that approach is. So basically, there are three key elements of it. I'll emphasize here the parts which I'm going to elaborate on. So one is what we call the Indic market economy. Now, actually it's a market economy, but I add the word Indic to it because it's different from the US and the European. So just to distinguish it, I add the word Indic to it, Indian, Indic, whatever you want to call it. So it has to be competitive, fewer monopolies. That's a standard market economy model, okay? But we place, because we are a poorer country, we've just moved in the last 5-7 years from being a low-income country to a lower middle-income country. We pay a lot more attention to complete and efficient markets, information barriers, and asymmetric information. A little bit of that flavor you'll see from when I discuss the details. Okay? So what is the role? The key issue here is the role of government and private sectors. Unlike in the planned era, the role of government has to focus on public good provision. For those of you who've done public economics, there's a proper definition of public goods, okay? But we take a little flexible view of it. So that is the government's role, and regulation of externalities. You hear of regulation of infrastructure, you will hear of regulation of telecom, regulation of financial sector. That's part of the government's job. It's part of the overall strategy to understand the economy, to figure out where it needs to be regulated, where it does not, okay, and get out of the latter so that the private sector can flourish. Market environment, this I've already mentioned, so creating a little bit of that I'll show you. And of course, we mustn't forget welfare transfers and Antodaya. And I'll tell you a little bit of that, but the key new thing is the empowerment. In 2002, there's a paper I wrote in EPW where I emphasized this empowerment, that we want to be different. We are different from the Europeans. They have a developed economy, a developed system, a static system. They are more interested just in static welfare. We are interested in empowerment. I'll say a little bit more about that. And then within this environment, it's the job of the private sector to compete, innovate, invest, and create the jobs, productive jobs. We don't want handouts. We don't want permanently to be just giving money. So what are the reforms? So that is the overall strategy. So within it, the environment, what does it mean to create the environment? And this is some of the reforms which we have done over the last 10 years. Reforms, of course, started in 91. I was part of those reforms. And of course, we can discuss the difference, etc., if there's any interest. But this is what we have been doing in the last 10 years. So in those 91 reforms, we deliberately, because there was so much to do and there was so much resistance from vested interests, that we focused on reforming the product or output part of the market and the financial system connected to it. Okay, so we did not deliberately touch labor markets, for example, because it's too difficult. Difficult meaning politically difficult. We did not touch the public sector, okay, because again there was too much vested interest, too much resistance. So what we have done over the last 10 years is to go through all the elements of the economy and say where it is over controlled. You know, where in the old planning system, everything was controlled. Okay, government was sitting on it, everything. Everything required permissions, everything had to be approved by the government. So the idea is to get rid of those controls, keeping in mind what I said about public goods and regulation. So you only focus on things which the government has to do and must do. Okay. So factor markets, public sector products and services. Just to give you, so what is factor markets? I hope you all know it's the labor, finance, productivity, R&D, etc. Right? So just to give you one example of product, even products and services, for example, the space sector, the nuclear sector, this was all controlled. Drones, even simple thing like drones, mapping, everything was controlled. So what we have done is gone systematically through whatever was left and decontrolled it so that the private sector can come in. One big success of this is the space sector. There are now at least 10 companies who are international competitive, private sector companies which are supplying services to the world, and much of that is to the US. Okay. So decontrol, let the private sector compete, create the environment. That's the basic strategy. Just to mention, for listing, it doesn't matter, we don't have to go through everything, but the institutional reform, I do want to mention the GST. Okay, President here mentioned GST reforms. GST is the first major economic change of the Constitution. It's not just the tax. See, the people who wrote the Constitution, when I look back, they were very perceptive about the economy. It's surprising, in 1947. The only thing they missed was that we need a unified market. What they had done was they had divided up indirect taxes, what was called, and separated it to the states. What the modern world we know is that creates a divided market. So the whole advantage of the Indian huge market is lost. So this constitution had to be changed to make a single law in which all states follow the same law. So that is the importance of the GST, the goods and service tax. The details have to be compromised. They are not so good. We've been trying to clean them up. But the constitutional change had to be done. And that had to have the support of all the states. So it's a major constitutional change. That is what we call institutional reform. You reformed an institution. Okay. Bureaucratic, I won't go into all the things, but EODB you may hear a lot in the press, etc. Something you should know. Ease of doing business. Okay. This is that over-regulated. Remember I said everything was controlled. Okay. So how do we do it? There are many vested interests, you know. I don't want to single out anybody, but for example, the tax system, or you take any part of the bureaucracy related to land, real estate, there are still huge vested interests. So what do we do? Do we fight with all of them? They can sabotage. Okay, it's happened all over the world. It can happen here. So what the idea has been, use technology to skip over these barriers. Okay. So that you remove them from the structure, because you can go directly to wherever the permission is. That's just an approach, okay? So all these things have to be thought of, you know. It's not like, signing something. You have to see what will be the resistance, how it will get through, what you need to do. You have to design the system so that you overcome those barriers. And then, of course, social welfare reform. Public goods I mentioned, but public health is a thing which I have fought for 20 years. Madam mentioned that, Professor Nanda mentioned that, I've been on many think tanks. This was the think tank ICRIER I was. It was very hard for, what is public health? Sanitation. You know, when the Prime Minister I think it was 2015 Independence Day speech, he mentioned toilets. Everybody was shocked. They said, India, this is the Prime Minister speaking Independence Day, he's talking about toilets. I thought that was the biggest thing he could have done. Amazing. I have been trying to tell people that sanitation is very important. There's again research, we can discuss that later, because I'm already taking too much time, but I wanted to give you an idea of what the approach is, okay? Because you won't get that from non-practitioners. And I've been in this business, I call it now, for 30 years or 40 years. What is it? Actually, I should mention, because it's so important. Everybody thinks that malnutrition of children is about nutrition. It's not in India. It's about sanitation. Okay? My first paper I wrote in 2006, and there were already 3 papers by somebody called Spears. Now there's a huge amount of research on India itself showing this. It's about sanitation. You cannot absorb the nutrition if you live in a dirty slum. Okay? So another thing is a slogan I use, which may be of interest, is I say scientific method, first the data, then the analysis, third the policy, and finally the views. Ideology is the reverse. Ideology starts with the views, and then you go backwards and pick out whatever data supports your views. Okay? Okay, so let's move on. I think you got the idea. I'll quickly give you a little bit about, because you hear a lot about how employment is going bad, etc. What I have here on the left, you can all see, there are 2 graphs. This is based on what is called PLFS data, this is the worker population ratio. Okay, so working age population above 15 years, you take the number of workers, divide by the population. Why is this important? Because if it is rising, that means you're creating more jobs than the working age population. Okay, and the red one is what corresponds the best to number of jobs. We don't have any direct measure of jobs created in India, but this is the best measure you can use, that pink line there. It's called the current worker status. But we have more data on the usual, so I'll give you both. But the main point here is this growth. If you take the 10, this is between 2017, 18 and 22, 23. It's rising. That's the key point here. Okay? That means the economy is creating more jobs than the number of people wanting those jobs. I mean, roughly speaking. Okay? So that is at the bottom one is growing at about 3.3% per annum. The top one is 3.7% per annum. So roughly between, you can say it's somewhere between. Okay. The second point here is about wages. So that is in the table. I'll just point out very interesting fact. So there are three types of workers in this survey. There are regular workers, casual workers, and self-employed. Self-employed are actually not workers. Okay, so if you lump them all together, you get very funny results. So what we have done is you have to separate these three out. That gives very interesting results. And second thing which I do is it's what is called the agricultural year, which is from June to July. Okay, so the only thing I do is I take the CPI for that period. Everybody either takes the financial year or calendar year. You have to correspond to this. Okay, so what I do is calculate the real growth again, the over the whole period, just like I've given you that trend line there. So what is the trend? This is an amazing interest. I mean, when I saw this, I was shocked in a pleasant way. Why? Because the rate of growth, real wages of casual workers is the highest, 4.2% per annum. Of regular workers is the lowest, 0.6% per annum. And in between, at 3% is the self-employed. Now just think. You heard of trickle-down theory? Those of you who've done development economics. This is the opposite of that. This looks like trickle-up. What's going on? I'm still studying it. I'm going to not give you the bottom line on this one. But point is, wages are growing at the lowest level. Real wages. That's the big point. Okay? So, something is working. Okay, I've taken a lot of time on this. Let me speed up a bit. So what is, now let's come to inclusion and empowerment. Again, I want to just give you a feel for it and then move on because there are a lot of things I want to talk about. So here, in that paper which I mentioned, I divided it in two parts. I call it in Antodaya, which is what used to be called basic needs. If you've done development theory, you will have read about it. That's one part of it. But the second is empowerment. So empower, that's the second part, empower every section of society in every region. Believe me, in this 14 months, when I've seen it from inside, the Prime Minister is fanatic about it. I don't know how else to describe it, really. Any group, you show him, this group is being left out, and I think we should do X or Y, and if he believes it, he does it within a couple of days. I mean, it's just amazing. You know, people call him all kinds of things, but this is what I've seen from inside. Okay, so when he talks, so it's not just women. That you can say it's a slogan. In a way, everything the political system does is a slogan. Okay, but there's much more to that. So the part which is more, which you do not see, there are programs for every segment of society. The biggest example of that is the Northeast. I mean, we have been talking about the Northeast for ever since I was in finance ministry. But the Northeast has been transformed in the last 10 years. The connectivity and what is going on. So every geography, every segment of society, that's the main point. If I have time, I will tell you something about the Diksha program. It's an amazing program. But so two parts. Give the basic needs so people start thinking of something else, but thinking is not enough. They have to be empowered, right? They have to have the skills or whatever they want to have. And in that paper I mentioned, I've given an example even of sports. The empowerment is not only about what we traditionally think, but any capability, okay? So whether you are a sportsman, whether you are handicapped, every segment of society must be empowered to do what they want. After that, it is there. You know, we don't want a nanny state. We take care of the basic needs, then empower them. Okay, after that, everybody has to do their own thing. Okay, that's part of the thinking. Okay, and then there's the role for the social sector. We do not have time, but every segment has a role. Remember what I started with? Role of government, role of private sector, role of NGOs. Okay, I'll just go over this now. So what is the result of all this? So we have seen a decrease. This table here is what are called multi-dimensional poverty indicators. You'll see that whole row of things which is negative, meaning the poverty as measured by these indicators has gone down. Okay, negative means down. Okay, so that's a good thing, not a bad thing. So there's a whole list of indicators which are taken in STG. We have added two more. I think it's housing and bank accounts. All these indicators are going down. Improvement in all, and greater improvement in lagging states. Okay, so there's been an improvement in all the lagging states, which has reduced this overall poverty. Okay, this is a summary for the nation, but we've looked at all the states and it's gone down. And then there's an average measure. I'll skip that. That's more detailed, technical detail of the overall. Okay, now let's come to the second part of what I have to say, which is also was raised by our chair today, is what are the trends and developments in India and the world which will determine what happens from now on. So I will just mention them, all of them, and focus on three of them. Okay, and if there's time in the Q&A, we can take up it. So one is demographic. India and the world, this I'll speak a lot of, so I won't say anything. Digitization, internet and hybrid. This is going to play a very, very important role in India's development. I will say a little bit about it. Climate change and energy. It's in the appendix. Again, I don't have the time, but I just want to mention the geopolitics of it. So traditionally, we have seen the efforts of Europe and America to bring climate change on our agenda as a way of evading their responsibility and forcing us to spend more. Somewhere around 2014-15, we made a fundamental change, and that comes from this, what is called the geopolitics of oil. So, incidentally, the oil price has a very strong effect on Indian economy. Again, there are papers which I wrote 20 years ago, you can see on my website. But the key point here is, and again, this is a technical point which I think all of you should know. The rise in oil price is like a tax given to the Middle East, let's say. Why is that? Because when we tax the population, we take something from the economy and then we put it back in the form of expenditures. Okay? A rise in oil prices is exactly like a tax to the oil producers. So the price goes up, the nation as a whole is poorer because this is not injected back into the economy. I'm giving you a rough picture so that you comprehend it. Okay? So oil dependence is terrible. We depend 70 to 80% of our oil. So it's inelastic. Those of you who remember your microeconomics, it's an inelastic good. It's used in everything. Okay, so we made this fundamental change that instead of fighting the developed countries, let's adopt it because it's in our own interest and go solar. That's the key point here. Okay, so going solar is in our interest because it will reduce our oil dependence and it's good for the world climate also. Okay, so that was the change in strategy which we made. That's all I'm going to speak about this till aggression. You all know about the Chinese aggression, I hope, in 2020. Again, this could be a huge burden on us because we have to increase our defense expenditures. So the strategy is, okay, let's use it to promote the economy. So that is where this Atmanirbhar defense production comes in. Use this to increase the production of weapons ourselves. Otherwise, all this money would have to be spent outside. Okay, so increase the domestic component. Supply chain monopoly and de-risking. This is a very important trend which I will speak a little more of, and a little bit on the unbundling of services. Let me say a little bit. Professor Nanda mentioned some of these issues. So we have weaknesses. I don't want to leave you with the impression that everything is hunky-dory, but my approach is to look at these weaknesses and take it as an opportunity. Just to put it in simpler terms, if this is a frontier and you're here, your opportunity is also greater. Okay? If you would have liked to be here, but you are way below here, that means you have a bigger opportunity. Okay? If you're right there, the opportunity doesn't exist. So look at the weakness as an opportunity. So basic education and job skill, this is the biggest weakness, is that World Bank and ASER surveys show that 55% cannot read properly at the primary school end. So we talk about all kinds of things, AI, etc., but the basic is not there. Okay? They cannot read. They cannot read a sentence. There's a simple test. Okay? They cannot comprehend what is written. You cannot function in the modern world if you cannot read. I call this basic education. This is another fight I've been having for 20 years. I said, okay, all this higher education is good. It's very good. There are people like you who will lead the country. But a person like me, government, remember role of government? I have to make sure that the poor in the rural areas can read and write at least. Let's do basic education and job skills. Okay? For 50 years, that was not the focus. Nobody bothered. Nobody even knew. Okay? So what do? We have to get that done. Okay? Female labor force participation. Actually, if you look at the trend, there are now papers. It came down from around peak in 2011. I don't remember the exact date. It came down a lot, but it's recovered. Okay? So the latest analysis by Goldar and others was in this university for a long time. Is showing that we are back at almost the peak levels. But there's a big opportunity. We must increase it. Okay, that was the point I made, that this is an opportunity. So my job is the economics, employment, growth. Okay, there are lots of people looking at social. Everybody in government talks about social. But macro, I mentioned to your professors here, that there's very little macro thinking, actually, even in government. Okay, so I take that as my special job. Manufacturing, labor intensive, we missed out. I will say a bit about that in the, so imports, substitution and supply chain. There's a big opportunity. Agriculture was mentioned. I'm sorry, I won't have time to talk about it, but if there's a question, I'll take it up. But all these are weaknesses. Too much of our labor force is in agriculture, rural areas, etc. So we have to work out ways to utilize it and turn that into a opportunity. So, okay. So let's get to the. This is these. As I said, I'll focus on three trends which I think need to be understood. Demography is mentioned. Everybody is talking about demography, but they think of it in terms of the domestic demographic dividend. The way I look at it is in the global context. So here is what I'm going to show you. So look at the the last three rows give you the share of global working age population of all these countries mentioned on the left. The first two columns gives you the change, first one in the past 30 years, second one in the next 30 years. Okay? So the change in share of working age population. Remember, working age population is what matters for employment. Remember the domestic numbers? Okay? That's where the game is. So you see all those red things there, all the developed countries have given you 5 high-income countries. It's better to call them high-income because there's a very specific definition. Developed people have all kinds of definitions, so you get into trouble. Everybody will argue, and I don't want to do that. I just take a number and say, okay, high-income, right? Then you have upper middle-income countries, China, etc., and some of these are our competitors in a sense, right? And then you have lower middle income countries, Vietnam, India, which is directly competing right now. Those will become competitors in the next 5-10 years. So firstly, you see all the developed countries or high income countries, better word, and China, etc., their share has been going down. Okay? But the important point is the next line, where every number is negative except India. You see India at the bottom, it's green. Okay? This is the big demographic opportunity and challenge for us. Okay? So we have to think globally. That's the key point. I'll show you a little bit how that works. Okay? So decline in the past, decline in the future. So the way I translate it into a single line is at the bottom. So our comparative advantage globally is going to shift, from low skilled to medium skilled to high skilled. Everybody thinks of high skilled, and this is true also. We are a 1.4 billion country, but I have What I am talking about is 1.4 billion, not 1 or 2 million which I employed in Bangalore. Okay, we already a high-skilled Bangalore industry, but that's not the point. The point is all the masses. They are there in the heartland. UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about. The low skilled, we have to take this opportunity, move to middle skilled and then high skilled for the whole population, not just few people. Okay, so that's a big thing. And a little bit I'll tell you. So I'm going to start with the low, medium skill jobs. So how do we do this? Okay, again I may focus on a little bit to give you an idea. We can. I don't think we'll have time for questions, but I have all the time for questions. If you, but you have a more program later. So high income developed countries. I showed you those 5 countries. These have complementary economies in terms of comparative advantage. This is not the way we have thought about in the past. Okay, source of technology and FDI. I'll give you some numbers. They are the largest market for manufactured exports. 2/3 of the supply chains are led by MNCs, which are headquarters in these DCs. Okay, why are supply chains important? Because 2/3 of the trade itself happens through supply chains, the MNC supply chains. I'll say a little bit more that's connected to supply chains and opportunity. There's a close association between MNCs, MNEs, some call them multinational enterprises, FDI in a country in its import of merchandise from the country, goods, merchandise goods, manufactured goods, etc. Okay, and so we have to lay out the red carpet. We are doing it. Finally, we missed the opportunity for 70 years. Okay, give you an idea of that. So how are we doing this? It's in the next table. First, quickly the numbers. So this table shows you that the same 5 countries, which not the same, but the 5 high income countries, they are the source of 60% of global FDI, which is 7 times China's. 7 times. They import 53% of the world's manufactured imports, i.e. 5 times China. And just Japan, UK and Korea, the smallest of those, are constitute as large a market for foreign manufactured goods as China. So this fascination with China has kept us from thinking about where the real opportunity is. Okay, and so FTAs, the strategy now is that we must have FTAs with US, EU, UK, etc. Okay, we already have with Japan and South Korea. We've got with Australia. We are in the process of finalizing with UK. We are discussing with EU. The USA at present does not want any more FTAs for their domestic political reason. So my advice is that we should work out some alternative way. This is my personal advice. This is not the official government view, but we have to, in my view, work out some way of having an FTA-like arrangement with them. The second element of this supply chains risking, I don't know how many of you have heard of de-risking, decoupling with China, etc. But the reason is that we used to, the world, not we, I never did. The world used to talk about PRC. I call it PRC because I do not want to demean the people of, this is the Communist People's Republic of China. We forget always, we talk China, Chinese. We have nothing against the Chinese people, okay? But it's the People's Republic of China, we must understand. They are not the factory, they established a global manufacturing monopoly. China has a monopoly over telecom, ADP and electronics, 40% of the global market. In many other, if you go into the details, it's even higher. This is incredible. People just forgot. This is like a huge monopoly. It's never happened in the world before. They just took their eyes off it. Okay? It's a monopoly. They found out suddenly in the pandemic that supply chains got disrupted because it all comes from China. Everything started coming to a standstill. That's what a monopoly is. Okay? So how? The problem is not that this happened, but it was unfair mercantilist policies which were deliberately designed by PRC to establish this. They are still doing it. Okay? So what does the world can do to de-risk? Again, these are my personal suggestions. They are not the official government. 60% import tariffs, etc. You will hear that Trump, if he comes in power, will impose a 60%. Just to give you a graph. Graphs are usually more interesting, so I put this in. These 2 graphs are, on the left you have the share of world merchandise exports to GDP. Share is a ratio. The interesting thing you will see here, this is what they talk about deglobalization. See, this is globalization, it's flattened or declining. This is what deglobalization, you will hear deglobalization is. Okay? The world trade, merchandise trade as a share of GDP is now falling or stationary. Okay? On the second side, you see the, share, this is not share, this is the ratio. That is the share of merchandise. And that rising line is China. The two largest exporters of manufactured goods in the world were that green and orange line, were the US and Germany. Okay? Around 2007, they overtook them. And see how it keeps growing. You need proof of monopoly. Look at this curve here and look at that. That's the unfair policies. They keep doing it. Okay? They keep rising. They're just displacing everybody. So we cannot accept that anymore. Okay? So that is where the global trend is. People talk, I used to talk about decoupling, people talk about de-risking, etc. This is a big global trend. This is the geopolitics, geoeconomics. It's no longer acceptable to the USA, increasingly to the EU, and not to India. Okay? So that is one big trend which will affect what happens. The second is related to skills and services. So this slogan, remember, I'm not sure if I have coined it, but some variation of it was around. But I say skill for India, skill for the world. Okay? This is the big thing. So skills and services. So in domestic, often we ignore semi-skilled, skill-intensive. So construction and repair, there are multiple levels of skills. Okay? You know, when you think of a plumber, you'll think of the plumber you called when there was a leak. There are several grades of plumbing. There's several levels of electrician. Okay? So again, I was shocked to learn that there is a major construction company in India which had 100,000 vacancies for construction workers. They aren't there. This is not your ordinary plumber. This is a fitter. They call he's a plumber. He joins the pipes in a chemical plant. Completely different level. It's the same thing. But you cannot have a leak. Okay, otherwise you'll have a disaster. So the middle skills, I call them the mid-level skills. We just do not think of them. There's a huge demand for mid-level skills. Similarly, wealth, health, physical, mental, education, skilling. Okay, let's move on. But you have the idea. So we often think of, we don't think low skills. That also, the basic education. Remember, it's a skill. If you cannot read, what are you going to do? Let me give you an example of let's say a carpenter in the rural area or semi-rural. What you're going to get is modular furniture. I still remember when I used to live in the US, you had to assemble, you had to read the instruction and put it together. If you train the carpenters, they will do it. Because our low level of education means everybody cannot do it. But you can train the local carpenter, otherwise he's going to be out of a job. Okay? So low level skill even. Just reading the instruction, putting it together. We don't think of this. Okay? That's why I'm emphasizing these things, because it's very important for you to understand. Okay? If you're going to be the leaders and change agents. Okay? So similarly, that you can go down various, Anganwadi workers, etc. There's a whole bunch of skills which are needed. Okay. The second part, the global part. Okay. So services. This is a concept. I'm overloading you with concepts, but I don't know if you want me to hurry up. Bataiye. I mean, it may be boring some people, but because there's a whole lot of concepts here. Okay. So in the 80s and 90s, manufacturing got unbundled. Okay? What does that mean? Okay? It means that earlier, when a factory built a shoe, everything was done in that factory. Okay? You got the leather, you stamped it, you put it together, everything was done more or less. Unbundling meant you separated out the processes. And you distributed, this is the MNCs, remember MNEs, they're very, very important. What they did was they unbundled the factory and they put different parts of it in different countries where it was more efficient to do it. Okay, that was unbundling. The same thing is going to happen to services. Okay, to some extent in business services happened already, and we are in that thing. We are part of that. But health, education, government. So here, to break the monotony, let me tell you a story. About 9 months ago, I was in the OECD. Okay, and they had got 2 papers prepared on aging and youth. And what I was shocked to learn is they cannot find enough people to run government services. There are no people there. Remember the demographic? Remember that demographic. They don't have people to run government services. So government services are going to get unbundled. Parts of it can and must be done in India. We can do it. Okay, but somebody has to think about it. The private sector has to think, all of us, the people who are doing the skills, we have to think about it. Okay? So demographic decline in advanced countries, that's the example I just gave you. The demand for high-skilled migrants will remain. Demand for certain workers will remain. For example, in the health, many of it is going to be geriatric care. You can monitor it from here. Okay? It'll all be connected. It'll be monitored from here. If there's any emergency, there'll be somebody emergency response there. The whole structure of the industry will change. Okay, the services, just like it happened in industry. So anti-immigrant servants. Otherwise, the job was in the US. They used to just keep importing people. Don't need to unbundle. Not happening now because the anti-immigrant sentiment is rising, not just in Europe. So that will mean this unbundling will happen very rapidly. Okay. So, and part of the pandemic event has been work from home, work from anywhere. This is a good trend for us. Okay. Remember what I said? We'll be doing it from here. So now they are used to it. They're thinking, okay, it's fine to work from anywhere as long as the job gets done. Okay. So big opportunity for India. Okay, let me speed up a bit here. So I wanted to talk about digital empowerment a little bit. But I just mentioned that what it helps us is to what we call the scalability problem. You know, we've had many NGOs over the last 30 years I've followed who work out some clever way or a good way to do something in one village. They extend it to 6 villages, but it doesn't replicate. You do it in Karnataka, it doesn't work in UP because it's huge scale. So scalability problem. So what the digital economy is going to do, and remember all the things I've said, they all link. Okay, scalability means you can provide. So in many village schools, one teacher teaches 6 classes. Okay, now that teacher can become an intermediary. It can get the expertise for each class online. Okay, so that's good. The digitalization is going to happen. So digital, please make sure you understand. You can work on the digital economy. That's my advice to you personally. You must be able to. Okay? So so what, from my perspective as a government person, I want to see how to use this digitalization in health, in education, to improve the quality of services. Again, I have a lot of examples, but I won't get into it, and probably you're getting bored now. So get information to the right people at the right time. That's the other thing. You know, you and I probably, we have a question, I have any question, we say, okay, let's Google it. There are many people out there who have no clue, okay? So I feel it's my job as government person to make sure that people, especially the lower end, have the right information at the right time, whether they are agriculturists, whether they are poor laborers, workers in the tea estates or whatever. So we have to think of it as part of my job. Okay, again, I have stories, actually, one story from the president who I called on when I joined. So, and the second part of it, to leapfrog the social divide. So, we have educated women in rural areas for whatever reason. You know, part of it is social, the social people have to work on it. They can't go out to work. So, bring the work to them. Okay, digitally. Okay. Skilling and gender, I'll because I think you're all getting a little tired. The only point I want to make is on that certification because it's very interesting. It's something you will not hear. So certification is very important. Okay, what do I mean by it? About 3 months ago, I came across an NGO which has created a structure of training, skills and certification in education at 11 different levels. You would think, teachers, school teachers. No, below the level of school teachers. 11 levels. Can you imagine it? I mean, I was shocked. They have discovered that in the rural areas, there are 11 different levels of skills which are needed in education. Think of it as education, learning, skilling, whatever, right? It's not education in the traditional way, probably, right? And they say so far they placed every single person they've trained. So what is the certification? Because I don't know. If I want to hire somebody for my aged mother, I don't know what the quality of the person is. When you certify, okay, by a recognized institution, it changes the whole picture. That is how jobs are created. You have to have the skills and the demand. You've got to do both. Okay? You just do a lot of skilling here and the demand is there. There's no point. That's not a job. But when you bring them together, it's a job. That's how we have to create jobs. Okay. This is the future. I can skip over it. What I showed here is some projections of, I will go over it. I'll just tell you this. This is how I think of it again. Here again, I'm not talking for the government, but I think for economists like all of you, including the professor, very important to understand. What I've done here is taken one social indicator. Just look at the graph. And plotted, this is globally, okay? Life expectancy at birth across countries, plotted against per capita GDP at PPP, okay? Welfare you can only compare in GDP or PPP. That's another debate which I will not get into. And the red dot there is India. Okay, you see it's worse than the line. The line tells you what is the average development of life expectancy with per capita GDP, which measures the average welfare of the people of the country. Okay, you can see it's below it. It doesn't matter what the exact thing is. We've done the same for male and female. This lower is because of female life expectancy. So just simple things like that. Start with the data. Okay, can teach you a lot. So, and the next dot is the upper middle income level, and that is the high income level. So here you have a plan. It's not a plan. So if you want to achieve any indicator, if you're here, you want to move here, and then you want to move there. 2031 is where I say we will become a lower middle income country. That projection I gave you, we just leave it. And this is where we become a high income country. So we have to make sure that social indicators match this. But I think of it not in terms of, and it turns out that if you do the problem is many countries don't have data, so it all gets messed up. So what I do is individually take the countries for which is data. If you rank them, the ranking gives you the same picture of the available countries. That's the key. You can't say there are 250 countries in the world and this is my ranking there, and then take 60 countries, that these indicators are good or bad. That doesn't give you anything. Okay? That's the analysis part. That is misleading. Okay? Because 250 countries versus 60, you have a sample of 100 sometimes. For example, in clean sanitation, there may be only 68 countries which I can find on the WDI, okay, consistent data set. So you have to look at it in terms of the corresponding per capita income. I think I bored you enough, so I will not do the conclusion which are already there in the talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Ravani. That was a very, very interesting talk. And I must appreciate the fact that in such a short time, he's covered a huge number of issues. And frankly, I don't think we have enough time for me to do a long analysis. I'll just take 1 minute and then I'll throw it open to questions for you. If you recall, I just started with 3 points in the sectoral, changes in India, and the third was the globalization aspect. I think he's covered all of them, except of course when he said that agriculture doesn't have a time. So in case you have any questions, you can ask. So very quick.